There is a moment right before you walk into a room full of strangers, when your body knows something your mind refuses to admit. Your heart speeds up, your hands go cold, and a quiet voice asks you the question you've been avoiding your whole life. Are you actually confident? Or have you just gotten really good at pretending? Stay with me, because the answer is going to change the way you see yourself. Most people spend their entire lives chasing a version of confidence that was never real to begin with. They rehearse their posture. They practice their tone of voice. They study the people who seem untouchable, and they copy the surface, hoping the inside will eventually catch up. But it never does. And deep down, you already know this, don't you? You've felt it. That strange emptiness after you performed confidence perfectly and still went home feeling like a fraud. That's not a personal failure. That's the first clue to a truth almost nobody talks about. Because real confidence was never a performance. It was never a mask you put on before you face the world. What you've been taught to call confidence is, in most cases, a costume. And costumes, no matter how convincing, eventually slip. Something within you always senses the difference between a person who is standing on solid ground and a person who is balancing on a stage that could collapse at any second. And so do other people. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it too. This is why some individuals walk into a room and without raising their voice, without demanding anything, seem to bend the air around them. And you've probably wondered, more than once, what do they know that I don't? Let's go back for a moment, thousands of years, to a man who was arguably one of the most powerful humans alive, and who understood something about the self that we've almost completely forgotten. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, ruler of a world stretching further than the eye could see, wrote himself a simple private reminder, meant only for his own eyes. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not power over how people see you. Not power over your circumstances. Power over your mind. That's it. That was the entire secret, whispered by a man who had every external form of power a person could have, and who still understood that none of it could give him what he was really looking for. Because here is the part that stings a little, but that you need to hear. Confidence built from the outside in will always be fragile. If your sense of worth depends on being noticed, admired, validated, chosen, then you have handed the keys of your own peace to people who don't even know they're holding them. You've made yourself a hostage to opinions that change with the wind. One compliment lifts you up. One cold glance tears you down. And you spend your whole life bracing for impact, waiting to see which way today is going to go. Does that sound familiar? Keep listening, because there is a way out, and it is far simpler and far stranger than anything you've been told before. Carl Jung, the psychologist who spent his life studying the hidden architecture of the human psyche, described something he called individuation. It is, in essence, the long and often uncomfortable process of becoming who you actually are. Underneath every mask you've built to survive childhood, to survive rejection, to survive the constant pressure to be likable. Jung believed that most people never complete this process. They live and die wearing a persona, a social costume so convincing that they eventually forget it's a costume at all. And what's fascinating, what should genuinely stop you in your tracks, is that the people we call naturally confident are very often simply the ones who have done a little more of this inner work. Not because they were born different, not because they got lucky, but because somewhere along the way, they stopped asking the world for permission to exist as themselves. Think about the last time you felt truly at ease around another person. Not impressive, not clever, just at ease. Chances are, it wasn't with someone powerful or intimidating. It was with someone who felt safe. Someone who wasn't performing, and so gave you permission not to perform either. That feeling, that specific, quiet relief, is the closest thing most of us ever get to witnessing real confidence up close. And here's the twist you probably didn't expect. That feeling has almost nothing to do with skill or achievement or charisma. It has everything to do with a relationship. Not a relationship with other people, a relationship with yourself. Because underneath every insecurity, underneath every desperate need to prove something, there is a very old, very human fear. The fear of being fundamentally unacceptable. Somewhere in your past, maybe so early you don't even remember it, you learned that certain parts of you are too much or not enough. And so you built a self, carefully, piece by piece, designed to hide the parts that once got you punished, ignored, or laughed at. This self became so familiar that you started to believe it was you. But it isn't. It never was. It was armor. And armor, however well made, is heavy. It is exhausting to carry. And it is impossible to feel genuinely confident while wearing it, because on some level, you always know it isn't really you standing there. The Stoics had a phrase for the alternative, a phrase that sounds almost too simple to hold this much weight. Live according to nature. Not nature as in forests and mountains, but your own nature. Your actual temperament, your actual values, your actual voice. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and later became one of the most influential philosophers in history, taught his students that freedom isn't the absence of hardship. Freedom is no longer needing the approval of people who don't understand you. Read that again, because it is the exact opposite of what most confidence advice tells you today. You've been told to build a stronger image. The Stoics would tell you to stop needing an image at all. And this is where it gets almost paradoxical, almost impossible to explain until you've felt it yourself. The less you need people to see you as confident, the more confident you actually become. Not because you've stopped caring about anyone, but because your center of gravity has finally moved inside you, where it always belonged. You stop scanning rooms for approval. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head, trying to predict how you'll be judged. You start speaking a little slower, because you're no longer racing to convince anyone of anything. Something in you settles, and people notice that settling before they notice anything you say. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the unimaginable horror of concentration camps, wrote something that quietly reframes this entire conversation. He said that everything can be taken from a person, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. If a person stripped of everything, of comfort, of dignity, of almost every external marker of identity, could still find an unshakable inner ground to stand on, then what does that tell you about the excuses we make for our own fragile self-esteem? It tells you that confidence was never about circumstances. It was never about how much you've achieved, how you look, how many people admire you. It was always quietly, patiently, waiting for you on the inside. So how do you actually get there? Not with more affirmations shouted into a mirror. Not with another list of confidence, hacks that fade by lunchtime. It begins with something much less glamorous: honesty. The willingness to notice, without flinching, the moments when you perform instead of live. The small lies you tell to be liked. The opinions you swallow to avoid conflict. The laughter you fake because silence feels too vulnerable. None of this makes you weak. It makes you human. But noticing it, gently, without self-punishment, is the very first step of taking off the armor you've been wearing for so long you forgot it was ever actual. The second step is even quieter, and it might be the one people avoid the most because it requires something our culture rarely rewards: solitude. Real, undistracted, unrushed time alone with your own mind. Jung believed that the psyche speaks to us constantly, but almost always in a whisper, and we drown it out with noise because the whisper can be uncomfortable to hear. It might tell you that the career you're chasing isn't yours, that the relationship you're clinging to has already ended in every way that matters, that the person you've been trying so hard to be is not the person you actually are. Confidence doesn't grow in the noise. It grows in the moments when you're finally quiet enough to hear what's true. And this is where the discomfort becomes, strangely, the doorway. Because every time you choose honesty over performance, you feel exposed. You feel like you might be rejected, judged, seen as less than the polished version you used to present. That fear is real. But here is what almost nobody tells you. The version of you that people connect with, that people trust, that people are drawn to without knowing exactly why, is never the polished performance. It is the version that dared to stop performing. That's the paradox sitting quietly underneath this entire video. The confidence you've been chasing outward was hiding inward the whole time, waiting for you to stop looking so hard everywhere else. There's an old idea, found in Stoic writing and later echoed by Jung himself, that says the same thing in two different languages. What you resist about yourself controls you, and what you accept about yourself sets you free. Not accept as in giving up. Accept as in finally putting down a fight you were never meant to win in the first place. The fight to be someone other than who you are. The moment you stop fighting yourself is the moment your energy, all of it, the energy you used to spend managing your image, defending your ego, predicting other people's judgments, becomes available for something else entirely. For presence, for genuine connection, for the kind of calm that doesn't need an audience to feel real. So the next time you walk into a room and feel that familiar tightening in your chest, try something different. Instead of asking, "How do I seem confident right now?" ask yourself a much older, much deeper question. Who am I, underneath the need to seem like anything at all? Sit with that question, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. Because on the other side of that discomfort is the thing you've been searching for this entire time. Not a better performance, but a self so solid, so quietly at peace with its own existence, that it no longer needs the world's permission to take up space. That's not arrogance. That's not even confidence, not the way we usually define it. That's something closer to freedom. And it was never as far away as you thought. If this made you see yourself a little differently today, that alone was worth the time we spent together.